Indie films. Oh, golly. Indie films. Even just hearing a beanie-wearing, septum-pierced nightmare creature saying the word indie films is enough to make any film person scutter into the gutter like little rats. Now, I don't hate indie films. I actually really rate indie films. By not being tied to a major film studios, filmmakers are free to have more control and do what they want with their film, which should be a good thing, but sometimes it's not. And that's what we're discussing this merry morn. My cat's trying to get over the camera. Are you doing alright? So, we come to a recent indie film, Duck Butter, written by Alia Shawkat and Miguel Arteta, and directed by Miguel Arteta as well. Starring Alia Shawkat and Laia Costa. I'm saying all of this wrong. All of it is wrong. Do not point it out, it's all wrong. I'm not Spanish. I'm wrong. I'm always wrong. Duck Butter claims to be an experimental comedy film. Now that sticks out to me in two ways. One, it doesn't have any of the components that would mark it as experimental, like weird and strange use of cinematography, animation, surrealism, or surreal use of set design or costume. To me, experimental is stepping out of the bounds of realism to show something about character or story in a deeper and more symbolic way. This film does step out of the realms of realism, but in a very not nice way. I didn't know that the film was going to be a comedy, so after Googling it and seeing a little comedy flag sticking up out of its little hat, I was annoyed and upset. The film makes no attempts at gags or jokes or strange situations for the characters to react to. The only odd situations are the ones that make us go, oh, so she's the quirky one and she's the awful one. Oh, okay, good, that's clear. The film follows two characters, Naima and Sergio. Ow. Indie cliche number one. The pretentious names. We've all seen time and time again characters that have been like, oh, my mum wanted a son, so she named me a boy's name, because that's a thing mothers do. My mum wanted an Avery, but you didn't see her naming me Budgie, did you? It's very, very annoying, and it says more about the mother than the character. The premise is that they go home from the bar together, have lots of lesbian sex because this film has a male writer, and then they decide to skip all the pretending and weirdness of dating by spending a full 24 hours together. Now, this is a very, very dangerous premise for a film. It can either be genius and have really interesting use of pacing and location and using the 24-hour period as a ticking clock, or it can be an excuse to lock two characters in the room because they're so unique. You can guess which route this film took. Now we meet one of the main characters, Naima, on her way to her new job acting in an indie film, which is probably better than this one, where she is not good at her job. Now this is forgivable. It would give her something to overcome because her refusal to be vulnerable manifests itself in her refusal to be wrong when the two directors are trying to direct her and kind of be like, hey, you're not very good. Now that's fair enough. It gives her boundaries to overcome very early on. But she's not even aware of it. Even when she's away from the set with her friend, she says, no, I feel pretty good about it. And we have to assume that she believes it because we're not given any sideways glances or sighs which would indicate that she's just putting on a brave face. The main way to make your character unlikable is to make them have no self-awareness. So she goes to a bar with her friend after being terrible at her job, and we meet the second character, Sergio, that, oh, my mum wanted a boy, so I'm a boy. It's silly. Now, I like this character, but she's a musician, and she starts singing.
Boom, my voice says make room, where the hand combat the gloom. When the aunt comes creeping up, I spread my arms so I'd assume the depth of its doom. With the brightness I resume, and I grow green leaves on my branches. It's the way my blossoms bloom, bloom, bloom.
If you're gonna have a character sing, choose an actor who is able to sing. Well, we've seen Mamma Mia, Beauty and the Beast and La La Land. We know that most films don't do that. We're introduced to her and automatically we know exactly what kind of character she is. She's fun, she's confident, she's a little bit strange. She just stops her show in the middle of it and just stops and has a chat with her bassist to see if she thinks the show's going well, just in front of the audience. But the male writer pops his head in for the first time when she has her conversation with her bassist and then goes and kisses a member of the audience. Her sexuality takes precedent over her passion and her talent, which annoys me so much about films with lesbians. Always their sexuality takes precedence over every other trait they have. And this kiss is completely unnecessary. As soon as she steps on stage, we know how she works, in contrast to Naima. Naima at first doesn't want to do the 24-hour thing because she refuses to be vulnerable and doesn't really want to get close to anyone. But that's the issue. We know that from the jump. As soon as we see her in the very, very, very first scene, sleeping with her fists balled up like this, we know what kind of character she is. But after she gets fired from her job, surprisingly, she goes to Sergio's house and asks if she wants to do the 24-hour thing. And this is where we get indie cliche number 2. Doing something completely random for no reason because it's quirky and aesthetic. This serves no purpose. It's never used again in the film. It doesn't come in later for the plot. Doesn't tell us anything about Sergio's character, apart from the fact that she's weird, but we already knew that. If she maybe drew them on the side of the door, closed it, and then talked through the door, kind of using the eyes as her eyes, that would make sense. But no, she just draws them on and then carries on like normal. There was no point for her, and there's no point for us to see it. And you doing that would also serve as that symbolic barrier that Naima needs to get through. But no, she just did it because she's so quirky. The rest of the film is the two talking, having lots of lesbian sex, male writer, male writer. Over the course of the film, we realise that Sergio is falling in love with Naima, and Naima is kind of using her as a distraction, which in a way makes Naima a very cruel character. And Naima's terrified of falling in love back. But again, we knew this from the jump. Why did they leave this realisation and this conversation until the very last act, when they could have established it at the start and then had both characters trying to overcome it together? And then at the end, oh lordy, the end. First there's this like weird awkward orgy thing, and it doesn't really matter for the film or for you, so I'll just leave that. But yeah, there's a weird orgy, and then at the end of the film, Naima keeps being like, oh, I'm fine, it's all chill, yeah, I'm fine. Sergio's like, no, tell me, you know, and that's all fine. So Sergio does a shit in a pan and shoves it in Naima's face until Naima will tell her what's going on. This is what I mean when we step out of the boundaries of reality in a bad way. So Naima does talk and says Sergio's not for her, she's too intimidated, Sergio's too carefree and wild, and Naima can't deal with it, and then the two part ways. Sad? So, you can probably tell this film annoys me a bit, but this film isn't bad. It's a decent film, but that's my main issue. The film doesn't step over that boundary into being something different or new, and when it does, it's not in a good way. Let's talk about the good stuff, because there is a lot of good stuff in the film. First, the two main... Oh, did you hear my hip click just then? Good stuff in this film is the two characters are legitimately really, really interesting. They jump off the screen and they feel real and they feel flawed and they feel like people who I could just go down to a lesbian bar and meet, because that's a thing I do. Naima, despite having no self-awareness, which is really, really annoying, feels very, very real. She's flawed, but she's also witty, cynical, and can be quite funny. Although, she doesn't like dogs, and what kind of bitch person doesn't like dogs? The same with Sergio. She's very bizarre and confident and weird, but still very fun, and she doesn't really think things through. She's also a really, really fun character to watch. For a bit. We understand why these two characters need each other, and we understand why they work and why they don't. Their connection also seems very real. There are a lot of good, really revealing, poignant, sometimes quite funny conversations that show a lot about their character. Sure. But again, this is a double-edged sword. So let's get into the bad stuff. Ooh, goody. Right off the bat, my two main beefs with the film are: one, all the lesbian sex. Oh my god. There's so much at the expense of conversation. For example, there's this really, really lovely scene where Sergio's playing the piano and not singing, thank God. And she's writing this song, and then Naima comes over and they're writing this song together, and it's really, really lovely. They're laughing, they're writing. This is very, very sincere and really, really lovely. But then Sergio just starts fucking going to town on her hoo-ha, and it's like, alright then, it's like, haha, oh Sergio, you horny, quirky lady. But then it doesn't stop. It just keeps going. It doesn't serve the plot, it doesn't serve the characters, so who is it serving? Male viewers, I wonder? My second big beef is the indie cliches. Now, honestly, these are just stylistic choices that annoy me. First, the constant use of that, like, slightly shaky cam, which is used to be like, hey, this is like real life, the environment's not stable. But that's just it. I'm so aware that you're using this tool to do that it distracts from the characters in the film and the stuff going on. Because you're so obviously trying to make it feel like real life that it's sucking you out of it. If just a stable tripod was used, then you can focus on characters and acting and set and all the things you should be focusing on rather than being like, the shaky cam. Secondly, the pale colour palette. Now, if you know me, I'm like a toddler. I love bright colours and lots of noise. And this film, there's a lot of white and beige and grey, and I understand this style choice. Naima's house is big and empty and white because she's big and empty and white. Then Sergio's house is warm and cosy and inviting because she's warm and cosy and inviting. And when they're spending the whole film in one house, or sometimes two houses, then the house is all we're going to see. And the colours make it feel flat and lifeless and dull, and past the halfway point, that's how it feels. Now, if they went outside occasionally, that would mean that when we go back to the house, those feelings of, warm, cosy, nice, they would be more obvious because we've been somewhere else. Apart from one dog walk, which is a great scene, their dog walk, Nima is talking about being cynical about the world and Sergio's being all silly and fun with the dog poo. They say they want to spend 24 hours together. They never said they had to spend those in the house. If we went to more places, that would make the 24-hour window feel more like a ticking clock rather than something that we have to sit through. Something else that annoys me so much with these kinds of films is outside characters being these weird, either omniscient or just there for the sake of being strange. The mother basically comes for breakfast and then she makes Sergio cry because she's passive-aggressive about her music, and I can't really blame her because the music is terrible. Sergio runs off and is crying, and she's left with Nima alone. And then she says this.
And you know, I'm a Mediterranean, and there is this tradition in the Mediterranean countries that in the spring, everybody used to gather in the fields and just fuck. They thought that that was what made the earth grow.
Sergio and I love arguing about that.
I hope you're enjoying her.
That is so creepy! That is... No mother, no human would say that! And it's only put in there to make us go, ugh. And we have no indication throughout the rest of the film that their mum's this weird nature sex addict monster. So it just feels so random. No, dirty, rotten, no, yucky, put it away. Something that stops this film being good, and they're so close, is that double-edged sword I mentioned before. There's only so many times I can hear a character go, hey, when I was young, my mum told me this thing that's so revealing about my character. It feels like they wrote their character biographies and liked them so much they had to put them in the full film, which is a dirty and a no. When you leave nothing up to interpretation and nothing up to the imagination, you don't give us anything to wonder about these characters. There's no more digging that needs to be done because you've shown us everything. This film feels so much longer than an hour and a half because of these long conversations, long montages, and long unnecessary sex scenes. The film becomes repetitive very quickly because all we see is sex, conversation, sex, conversation. That's it! That's all we see! Overall, the reason I call this film the indie illusion is because although indie by definition is just a film made independently of a major film studio, but to me, an indie film should be something that has something different to say and something that you wouldn't see or wouldn't hear in a mainstream film. It should be something that has something new to say or a new story to tell. The experimental title makes it even more so. The 24-hour limit could be used as such an effective ticking clock. The characters are always trying to find something to do or always trying to find a new way to fill the time. But they don't! There's nothing there to make us curious about them. It's like being given a present that hasn't been wrapped. It's nice to have a present, but half the excitement is being able to unwrap it and the anticipation and the curiosity. But something that really confuses me is that Alia Shawkat, who plays Nima, helped to write the film. So why all the lesbian sex? Unless she... maybe she fancies the other conspiracy. We know why there's loads of lesbian sex when male writers are involved, because a lesbian relationship couldn't possibly be interesting unless they're scissoring the shit out of each other the whole time. I understand that we need sexual intimacy between them, but we don't need it at the expense of them going to new places. To me, the indie illusion is thinking you have something different to say when you don't. Quirky does not mean poignant. Talking about vaginas and having these really revealing conversations about your characters isn't going to engage your audience no matter how many boobies you throw at us. These characters connect, but neither of them grow or change. Naima is the perfect flawed character who could go on this journey with Sergio throughout the film to grow and change, and then at the end, when they do part ways, it would be more heartbreaking because all of that change would feel like it was in vain. The indie illusion is this film, and there's so many films like it that annoy the bum off me because there's so many writers with something different to say that aren't given these opportunities because they don't fit these indie cliches, which are recycled over and over and over and over again. Thank you. Those are my thoughts on Duck Butter. If you agree, good. If you don't, then leave a comment. Let me know. We'll fight, and it'll be great. I'm Eve. That was Duck Butter. Thanks. Bye.